Hey everyone, I'm Sarah Clark from Fab Fertile, and we've got Justine Altman here, our functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. Hey, Justine.
Hey, Sarah.
Hey, so today we're talking about dairy, another one of our favorite foods. Unfortunately, I no longer have dairy, although you know what, I don't feel like I'm suffering. There's a lot of different nut milk businesses has exploded in the last little while, so lots of different alternatives. And this is something that we see similar to gluten. We see a theme of people having sensitivity to dairy. So with low AMH, high FSH, diminished ovarian reserve, premature ovarian insufficiency, dairy sensitivity. That was the case for me. I had, great skin in my teens. All of a sudden, in my early 20s, started getting acne, and that can be, there's a tie between acne and ear infections and allergies, eczema. I had that as a baby, and then in my 20s again, had these like itchy arms, itchy. I had like itchy eyes here. Literally, the eczema was all these different little places of my body, and now it's all gone as I've cleaned up my diet. But really, I like this quote from Dr. Mark Hyman. Dairy is nature's perfect food if you are a calf. Like, why are we drinking other animals' milk? It's interesting how that happened. But Justine, your take on dairy?
Yeah, so dairy is a problem for most of us. And it's similar to gluten in that we just about everyone has a challenge with it. So basically almost every human. And what's different though is that we tend to recover from it better. And so if you have dairy, so I do still eat dairy on occasion. I have cheats. But I know when I'm doing it that I'm causing some inflammation. I know that that day represents a setback to my health. And so it's a calculated risk and it's not something that I do very often. But ultimately, we know that it causes inflammation. We know that it causes this nasal sinus congestion stuff, right? And so, right, if you eat cheese or you eat any other kind of dairy, usually later in the day, you've got sinus issues. And we've seen with clients where they remove dairy and suddenly the sinus congestion, the allergies, the whatever yuckiness they had going on in their head, in their face, it just totally goes away in a matter of a couple of days, like really fast. It really goes away fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember my husband standing there eating a large bag of cheese curds, saying, "Wow, these are really great." And then I'm like thinking to myself, I wonder how he'll be feeling on Monday, because he's eating it on a Friday, and on Monday that's that delayed food reaction. Sure enough, his sinuses had blown up, and I'm like, "Do you think it was the cheese curds?" Oh no, it can't be. Anyways, he's now dairy and gluten free and come over to this side of, because his sinuses, he was predisposed to ear infections as a baby. We see that a lot. So this is the case for my kids as well. So ear infections. He has seasonal allergies. Literally every allergy season as a little kid would be, sneezing and sneezing. I didn't develop seasonal allergies until my early 20s. Again, I cleaned up all my gut health, and now those have gone away. And then also acne. My husband suffered with acne as a teen, and now obviously that's cleared up. But it is to really, I think the chronic sinus infections. A lot of people, that's what I had that for years, and took antibiotics for every sinus infection. And as I cleaned my diet, took out dairy, then those started to go away. But really, I think is that there's like a stat saying here that over 75% of the world's population is genetically unable to properly digest milk and other dairy products. And it's a problem known as lactose intolerance. So I think some people they're like, oh, you know what, when I have dairy or cheese, usually it's cheese, or ice cream or whatever it may be, they just don't feel well. And they're like, ooh, but then they might take a lactose pill, or maybe they say, but I outgrew that. I don't have that problem anymore. What's your take on if you had lactose intolerance and now you think dairy is fine?
Yeah, so there are two different kinds of ways that we have a negative reaction to dairy. So one is we have an immune response to it, right? Where our immune system is actually saying, no, this is an invader, it's bad for us, and it starts to attack. The other is digestive challenges, right? Where we don't quite have the right enzymes to break down the dairy to fully digest the dairy, in which case now it's just this thing that our body has to deal with moving through rather than it being this nourishing thing that we're taking in. And people can have a reaction to one or both, right? So it can either be an immune response or a digestive response or both things going on. And just because you don't have digestive issues when you eat dairy doesn't mean that you don't have issues when you eat dairy, right? And so, like we talked about, the sinus issues is another symptom, the skin breakouts is another symptom. And that's evidence of a deeper sort of immune response to the dairy, right? And so there's lots of different ways that we can be intolerant to dairy. But what we know in general is that dairy tends to seem to serve just about no one. And it really just, it causes inflammation. And so even if you feel like you've outgrown the digestive issues, it doesn't mean that it's not causing other issues elsewhere in the body, in other systems.
Yeah, again, like a broken record, but really looking at the elimination diet, you can go to Get Pregnant Naturally, and I talk about how and why to do the elimination diet. I'll have a link in the show notes for that as well. And really taking the top allergens out of your diet for 10 days and then systematically reintroducing them. Dairy is one of those top allergens, and really seeing how you feel. Like we talked about in another episode when we were talking about the fertility diet, with dairy being high in estrogen due to the pregnant cows, and also could be not everywhere in the world, but there could be antibiotics and growth hormones or steroids in the dairy, which then impact your endocrine system. Anything you wanted to say there?
Yeah, so it's full of all sorts of things that are problematic for our bodies. And unlike, human milk that we were born to be consuming when we were first born, right? That's full of good, rich probiotics, right? It's alive. It's full of live cultures, just like a yogurt would be, right? And that's why they promote yogurt as a health food, is that it's full of live cultures. It's the same thing with milk when it starts off. But for the most part, the milk that we get from our grocery store, it's got antibiotics in it. We're not supposed to have those. It's got growth hormones. That's not good for us. It's been pasteurized, right? And so all of the live cultures have been killed off, and now it's more susceptible to pathogens, right? To bacterial growth and things like that. And so it's basically just this cocktail of, there are some nutrients in it. There are some good nutrients in milk, but otherwise it's this cocktail of stuff that just causes inflammation for us.
And then estrogen dominance, where we see, and typically, like we're not going to just assume there's estrogen dominance, because that may not be the case. And really, we're looking at hormone testing using urine to determine, exactly where your estrogen is in relation to progesterone and other like testosterone, as well as your other hormones. But really, if there's fibroids, endometriosis, obviously infertility, PCOS, PMS, weight gain, kind of the hips, thighs, and midsection, that potentially could be estrogen dominance. Anything you wanted to say there in relation to dairy and kind of how that plays out?
Yeah, just when we're taking in dairy, we're taking in some additional hormones that we don't need to be taking in, right? So there's estrogen in milk. There's estrogen in some other things in our daily life, and we end up with estrogen dominance a lot, and that can happen even if estrogen is low, right? And so estrogen dominance is really describing this ratio between estrogen and progesterone, and so it's when estrogen is too high in relation to progesterone, and those things sometimes, they cause a stress on the body, which lowers progesterone. So it's sort of this double whammy. It's an increase in estrogen and a lowering in progesterone. And it widens this gap between estrogen and progesterone, which are supposed to be pretty well matched in a very specific ratio. And when that happens, like our whole hormone balance gets thrown off, right? And so that, again, that affects our fertility, that affects all these things that are typically linked to estrogen dominance. So again, the endometriosis, the fibroids, the fibrocystic breast tissue, the unpleasant periods, the irregular cycles, all of those things can be related to those issues. And so removing dairy products is another sort of like home run, basically, as far as easy things we can do, right? It doesn't cost us time. It doesn't cost us money. It's just, we take it out of the picture so that it's not causing inflammation and contributing to the problem.
And then a lot of times we see here where you may be, so like myself and Justine, so non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and then also a cross reactor with gluten is dairy. So the body sees casein, which is the protein in dairy, they sees that as gluten, and then mounts an immune response. And there's a whole list of other cross reactors, unfortunately, that to gluten. That's why people are like, oh, I've gone gluten free, and then maybe the symptoms have not improved. And in this case, maybe you're not pregnant, or maybe you're still having miscarriage. Could be the fact that the body is still under attack by this cross reactor. Can you just talk about that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so what happens is the immune system just, it gets confused. It thinks that the dairy is gluten when this happens. And so it's reacting as though you just ate some gluten, right? Which again, we know causes a little bit of leaky gut, which means that particles are getting into our bloodstream that aren't supposed to. And our immune system, you guys, this is dangerous, right? If we get things into our bloodstream that aren't supposed to be there, the body knows this has potential to be an infection. This has potential to be deadly to us. And so it goes on the attack. It's trying to save our lives. And so when it's doing that, it takes an immense amount of resources, right? Because now the body's putting all of its energy into the immune system to try to fight this off because it thinks it's a pathogen for us. And that causes it to err on the safe side, which also means it, it attacks anything that looks even remotely suspicious, which sometimes includes our own tissues.
Mhm.
So that can absolutely lead to autoimmune conditions.
And the lactose intolerant. So if you know you're lactose intolerant, what is your advice for someone there?
Yeah, so it's a goofy thing. Sometimes when we talk to people, and we'll ask them about, like, do you have any known food sensitivities? And they'll say no, but when I eat dairy, I get a tummy ache, or when I have this, I get gas, or when I get this, sometimes I get headaches. And ultimately, if you have any of those symptoms that you have already had a suspicion or a hunch that were related to a particular food or another, you don't need a food sensitivity test. You don't need us to tell us that you have a sensitivity to that food. You know that your body's responding to that, and it's not just about like, oh, well, if I have dairy, I know I'm going to have a little bit of a bellyache for a little while. It's not just enduring that discomfort for a little while. It's how much did that cause your body to lead to this problem that goes on for a week or 2 weeks or 10 weeks or, 6 months. So it's not just about surviving the discomfort right now. It's about what amount of stress is that continuing to cause in our body for some longer period of time.
I think with the dairy piece that we as a society have been, there's a lot of marketing around this that, milk is the only way we can get our calcium. Lots of studies on that actually calcium really isn't as bone protective as we thought. And in fact, vitamin D appears to be more important than calcium than in preventing fractures. So what's your take on that?
I agree. And also vitamin K2 is also
Right.
very important. It helps direct the calcium that we are getting into our system, into our bones and our teeth where it's supposed to be. But there are tons of other foods. Dark leafy greens especially are very high in calcium, right? So there are tons of really great nutrient dense foods that aren't milk that are really high in calcium.
Yeah. Kale, almonds.
Yep.
And so if you do opt for dairy, like when we talked about the fertility diet piece, like first of all, you want to test it. And then if you do opt for it, then you want to get grass fed, organic, like Kerrygold butter. Now I am very sensitive to dairy, so I don't have any of it. When I have retested it, and every time I test it, I'm like, I just don't feel good. It'll tweak my bladder, or it'll just make my sinuses go off. And I'm like, not worth it. But for you, if you found that, dairy could be okay, you potentially could do ghee, which is clarified butter, or Kerrygold. We would say take it completely out for 90 days, like completely out. Food sensitivity testing to see for sure if it is really high for you. Anything you wanted to say there?
Yeah, and if you do that and you bring it back in, give it a good solid 4 days of reintroducing it, where you have a little bit for every day for 4 days, and really stay observant. Like, did I have any muscle aches? Did I have any sinus congestion? Did I have any headaches? Did I have any skin breakouts? Did I have any fatigue? Did I have any belly issues? If any of those things were gone for the couple of months that you took it out, and they came roaring back when you brought back dairy, that's your sign to know that your body's not interested in dairy, at least right now.
Again, these are themes we see with low AMH, high FSH, diminished ovarian reserve, premature ovarian insufficiency. We see dairy sensitivity. So, strongly encourage you and your partner to do the elimination diet, taking it out, and then systematically reintroducing. If you are ready to get a little kickstart with the elimination diet, our fertility diet challenge, the spring challenge, is starting April the 19th. Just go to Fertility Diet Freebie. I'll have the link in the show notes, but fertilitydietfreebie.com. All chef prepared recipes, all anti-inflammatory, and they also taste awesome. So you can go to Fertility Diet Freebie. So any final thoughts on dairy, Justine?
Just it's a really personal decision, but we really encourage you to explore it.
Awesome. Thank you.